Welcome to the Directors UK podcast. We're the professional association for UK film and TV directors. No matter the format, no matter the genre, our featured directors share their approach to the craft. We hope you enjoy.
Tonight, we have in conversation Richard Linklater and Sarah Gavron on Hitman.
All right. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Thanks for being here.
He's been doing so many of these. I'm a bit rusty.
Thanks for doing this. Not these fun discussions.
And he just said to me, this isn't going to be like any of the other Q&As, is it? Because it's directors.
Yeah, you're going to ask, like, good questions, right?
Yeah, I'm going to ask, well, I'm going to begin with saying, we're in a room full of directors, so I'm sure, like everybody else, they've all been inspired by your work. And one of the reasons I've been so consistently inspired by your work is because you seem to reinvent storytelling every time. And do it in a different way, which is extraordinary. And in this film, you're merging genres. You know, it's not a noir, is it? Well, it's a bit of a noir, it's a bit of a thriller, it's a bit of a comedy. How did you, as a writer, how did you do that? How did you balance that?
I love that feeling, like you just get obsessed. Like Gary Johnson was a real guy. This was a nonfiction article in a Texas magazine. And I got obsessed with it. And then working on the script, I mean, it starts off just a character piece, but Glenn and I, we started adding. That article ends around the time he lets her go. So it's not even a third of the way through our movie, about a third of the way. So everything from then on is just kind of a flight of real ride fancy. Yeah. But I liked it. Once that took off, it kind of became more than just a character piece. It was like, oh, this is kind of noirish, you know? It's like, oh, I'm in a genre. You discover your genre as you go, you know? And then I said, well, if it's actually a love story, if she's not setting him up, if it's not the old Black Widow story we've seen a million times, what if it's more of a love story? Then it's kind of a screwball comedy, you know? And what keeps the couple apart, you know? So those two are my favorite genres, you know, historically. Those are bumping up. And then in the Hitman, there's a Hitman genre in there somewhere too, even though we're kind of deconstructing that. So I don't know. It's fun to do genre work. I called it that. It's more plotty than most of my things, but I want it to work, you know, within the genre.
So were you looking at other films that were of those genres?
No, I swear I didn't sit. I know them, you know.
You just know them. You've imbibed them.
I remember them. It's kind of good to have a general, not anything specific, but you just know the tropes of the genre.
Yeah.
You know, like the rules are, and it's all these rules we abide by are old rules. They're Hays Code rules when it was against the law for your sinning person to get away with anything. Well, that went out in the 60s, right? So we can get away with anything now. So it was fun. It's been a long time, but some people still adhere to these kind of, it was kind of fun to not feel under that, like we could do anything.
And how were you and Glenn working? Were you sitting in the same room? Were you bouncing ideas?
Never. We were never in this. It was the pandemic.
Right.
And so we're friends, you know. And the scripter, you can kind of share a screen. But we didn't even do that much. I would, you know, write, send each other stuff. And
who came up with the inner voice idea? You know, that you would hear what was going on in his head as he was sitting with the...
You know, we started doing that later.
Did you?
Yeah, actually.
In the edit?
We did that in post.
Oh, okay.
Little. Once you get in voiceover, it can be very helpful.
It could be hugely.
Yeah, it's like if I'm going to do that, I don't need actors explaining everything to the audience. Things you don't know. Yeah,
but it's also
a lot of it.
Genre,
I did more in post on this than almost any movie. I mean, not that it became a different movie, but that coda at the end was the real Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
That wasn't in the script. The Hitman montage, all the movies, that wasn't in the script. I really believe, you know, making a comedy especially, and especially this because it's very plotty, I didn't want audiences coming out with questions. I wanted it to be like a full experience. And then you show it to even 20 friends, you know, just in your editing room or in the little theater. And they're like, well, if it's a true story... Did they get away with murder? Like, and I was like, oh yeah, you know, that didn't happen. But I couldn't tell every audience member in the future.
Oh,
that. So
I see.
I've got to come clean that didn't happen. Okay, that's a good note.
Yeah.
And then it was like they were confused about the hitman myth. Like, so you saying him? I said, no, it's. But you can't just say it once. I needed that whole and plus that montage was really fun to put together all those Hitman movies and those moments. So that kind of hammered that point home. And even the interior thoughts, we just thought that was funny, you know, along with the voiceover that changed a little bit. The voiceover was in the script, but it changed a little bit. But we could kind of augment it add a little more. So it was kind of a flowing process.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I learned
like...
a lot. Like I said, I learned more from test screenings on this. Probably did about 3 test screenings and just little things. You know, we had a sign that came up that said 6 years later, and I was like, we don't need that. It's obviously sometime later. Who cares?
Yeah.
You know, just you put in things and you realize you don't need to.
Okay. Well, we've got to talk about casting because obviously casting is everything. Do you believe casting is everything? Everybody says it's 90%.
It sure is a high percentage of everything. If you get it, like any step of filmmaking, you know.
Yeah, if you get
it wrong,
you're screwed.
you've sunk the whole ship. Yeah, so you better get it. Filmmaking's all these stages, and you better get them all right.
Yeah, well, I just felt like every part in this was so beautifully cast because they were all so distinct, weren't they? Even those little tiny cameo parts, you know, people who were there for like one scene were so genius. But tell us about the 2. I know that they had a funny first meeting, didn't they? Where you were stressed because they didn't call you.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I had met Adria, and just via Zoom. You know, that part is so important, obviously, to the movie, and. I just
was this in COVID you were meeting?
No, it was post-COVID, but it was just
okay.
kind of a first, get to know you because
Yeah.
I was, starting to meet people, and I was like, oh my God, she's so just perfect. She's so vivacious, so smart, so funny, obviously beautiful. You know, that's a hard part when you talk to casting directors. And so what are you looking for? I said, well, it comes down to this, that someone would give up everything they've worked for their entire life, their freedom to be with. So they've got to be that.
Wow.
And so that's a narrow little small little target but and so I thought, oh, she's just fantastic. I liked her. And I told Glenn, well, I didn't want to, you're my creative partner here. We've been on this, but I don't want to tell you I've already cast her because you haven't even met her yet.
But you had.
Yeah. But I wanted them to meet. I need confirmation.
Yeah.
And, or I was pretending or whatever.
What did you do in the rehearsal room?
Well, it even starts before that. Just, Zooms and just talking about character, story. I just, read through the script and start answering questions. And
do you block scenes?
This was so plotty. Later, kind of comes in waves.
Right.
Toward the end, I'm trying to rehearse on location.
Yeah.
Just to kind of figure out every shot and get them very comfortable because we had a pretty tight schedule. We had it's a lot of locations, a lot of scenes, but we had 30 days, which is just enough. I'm not complaining. But we had reduced our budget and schedule, so it felt like a real kind of challenge. So I'm a big over preparer, believe it or not. A lot of rehearsal, a lot of prep, and
so
then we shoot these scenes rather quickly, but we're not bumbling around on set figuring out what we're doing. We just show up and we're rolling. So
you're rolling straight away.
As quick as possible.
That scene, that extraordinary scene where the iPhone and, she's following.
Toward the end, the iPhone scene, I guess. We need a better name for that scene.
What are you going to call it?
Cell phone scene, texting scene, whatever.
But that was very rehearsed?
Oh, yeah. We probably worked on that scene more than, definitely the most rehearsed, worked on scene.
And 2 cameras.
I think so. That one and the scene after when they come back and Jasper's there, those 2 really required a lot. And but we shot it in a few hours, a couple hours probably.
Are you shooting lots of footage? Is it like reams of material?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, just like regular,
Okay.
one take after another. It's not like it. Yeah, even though we're shooting digitally, I still shoot like it. I'll just keep the camera rolling.
But you've got 2 cameras.
Yeah. For
which is really
somewhat that's important in a scene like that. But yeah, it was pretty straightforward the way it was shot.
And you were working with your longtime collaborator, relatively longtime collaborator, Shane.
Yeah, Shane.
Yeah. Because
I
read
working together 20 years.
Yeah,
we were working together. Is that a long time now? Getting older.
But I read somewhere that he said that the reference was sunlit noir, a noir without any night scenes. Is that right?
Well, yeah. There's that. What's it called? Sunlit noir, daylight noir. Kind of the Chinatowns, and it was one of those movies where it's New Orleans, the South. It's not like night. Again, the cliches of the genre. I think that's even its own cliche. Or its own type. But yeah, somewhere in there. But I didn't.
And do you, with him, do you sit down and look at storyboards and plan? And
No. Again, I used to do that. I used to reference movies and I don't know. It's just, you do it more. You're just like, oh, that thing. We just have a shorthand.
But there was a lot of camera movement in this.
Oh, yeah. Of course. I mean, I work all that out, but, it comes natural. It's not
which I thought really worked for the story, that you were constantly kind of on the move. It felt like you were constantly on the move.
Yeah, some movies more than others. But, I don't know. It's become more of an intuitive thing over the years.
Yeah.
I never was big on storyboards outside of like an action sequence or something that a lot of people have eyes on.
But this feels like it has some really complex moments. So you've got all those scenes in the van, which is such a little tiny location to shoot
that
5 people.
The thing about it's such a small, you have limited options on how you're going to shoot.
That's true.
No long dolly shots there, no Steadicam needed. So in a way it's simple. So I
Did you build that van or did you?
No, real van.
It was a real van?
Yeah, we didn't build anything. Wait, did we have one set on this whole movie? No. All location. Even her house, it's that New Orleans style. They had some zoning thing, like you paid taxes by how wide your house was, but not how deep, back in like 1800. No. So New Orleans is full of these really narrow houses that are really far back. So it was like shooting on a submarine. Really, it's that narrow, and we're all walking on each other. We were in that house for almost a week.
Oh, that's hard.
Kind of hellish, yeah.
Because New Orleans really comes to life, but not in a kind of obvious way. So tell us about working there, how that was.
Well, that's its own genre, I think. There's a lot of New Orleans movies. So I remember it was set in Houston originally, Houston, Texas. So it was just kind of 2 southern cities. We just moved a little east. Was trying to avoid the tropes of New Orleans, like, if you know New Orleans, it's like...
Are those street names real?
Not every... Yeah, those are real. We didn't, Yeah. Well, streetcar named Desire, Desire is a street.
Right.
That's the, like a cable car, that's a line and a street. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
But I read that someone said in one of the interviews I read with you that New Orleans had a sort of identity crisis that related to the film, that somehow it mirrored the identity crisis that you were portraying.
Maybe, because New Orleans, I realized pretty early, like, it is kind of the movie. Like, the people are great. You love them all. Yeah. They're really big characters, and yet it's sitting on a bedrock of like lawlessness, and they're understaffed police. There was like carjackings. It's a volatile place, but kind of wonderful too. And it is the place you could get away with what they get away with at the end.
Really?
Yeah, it's very plausible. Very plausible. Not a lot of other cities, but New Orleans, yeah.
So did your cop actors do any research and hang out with any cops?
Yeah. Hung out with a lot of undercover guys. Yeah. They're a little scary too. Even though they're on this side of the law, you go, oh, you guys do that? It's like, it's crazy.
Because you were listening to the surveillance tapes.
Well, those from Skip, the writer of the article, he gave me all his journalistic research, which included surveillance tapes, a lot of evidence, surveillance tapes, bad 90s video, 80s and 90s, surveillance video, a lot of recordings, a lot of transcripts. It was really just darkly humorous watching these desperate people decide to end someone's life so casually, so banally, and then before they're arrested, of course. But it's just weird. It was just, but I found it so
And the pie line
funny.
Was a real line?
Yeah, you couldn't make that up. That's Gary's line. And that's a good example. Like, the people who are participating, who are soliciting murder, like, they love that. It feels like real. Like, oh, yeah, how will I know you at the diner? Oh, I'll be eating pie. And come over and ask them, oh, that's like code. Yeah, that's real. Wow. They're just all falling for it. And there's Gary about to arrest them. But, we can argue the ethics of entrapment, maybe. But, most of them I didn't take to be total psychopaths. They're really people who just need probably mental health services right then,
Yeah, but it becomes quite profound in a way, doesn't it?
Well, the joke, is that it's kind of a consumer culture critique, I think, that you could just, you can buy anything. You just purchase someone's death, like it's groceries or something. It's really crazy that people believe that's even real. But I think because of our industry, we've made so many good, fun hitman movies. It's just in the pop culture. So I've always been fascinated by that the disconnect between the reality and what people think is real. So
Yes, because you can't actually hire a hitman. So.
not at I say retail. Like, a mob, if you're in the mob and there's some drug war going on, I think people get killed all the time.
Yeah.
But I call that affiliated, like
Yes.
the woman who lures in the young lover to kill her husband. That's real. That kind of stuff happens. But again, there's a relationship. There's maybe an incentive or a motive, something emotional going on. But this idea of a cold professional, that's such like a macho kind of myth. It's just,
it doesn't exist.
No, but that's good news, right?
Well, yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
It is good news.
People feel a little disappointed sometimes.
And
I can't just hire a hitman. It's kind of empowering, maybe.
The characters that Glenn plays, all those different personalities, were they real? The ones that Gary did?
Yeah, a lot of the dialogue there is true. The teenage boy's trying to kill his mom, that's verbatim. Video games and some change. I mean, it's crazy. You can't make up a lot of this stuff, all this society. So a lot of that's very real. We kind of went off the deep end with the costumes a little bit.
I was going to say,
the real Gary did alter his look, and he would maybe dress up like a biker or something, but Glenn went off the deep end a little bit. But I thought it was great because think about it, it's rare you give yourself permission, because I'm always trying to be kind of, in the realistic, believable vein. But this is all BS, right? This is all fake. It's all artifice. So you're just being what they think a hitman is. So we had this license to kind of go out there, and it was still kind of believable.
So were you doing a lot of work on these costumes and makeup to define who these people were?
Hair, makeup, wardrobe, everybody had a good time. But I never really saw those until, we had facsimiles of Glenn's face with different wigs and, as much as you can, but it was pretty time consuming to get that final look.
Yeah.
So we only did it on the day.
Right.
Glenn would come in 3 hours early if we were shooting it first, and then, we'd all be kind of waiting. And he was also working on those accents. Like, we would rehearse, and I could tell he was working, like, okay, Russian guy, how's your Russian accent going, Glenn? And I was like, oh, no. What if some of this doesn't work? I can just cut him, if it doesn't work. So let's just keep going. So on the day the van door would open and out would step this freak, and be like, oh, my God. But it all kind of worked. And, I ended up not cutting one of them.
You didn't cut
Yeah, we shot all those, and I figured, even for storytelling, you'd cut a few. But no, we cut some at a script level. As we were working out the characters, there was some redundancy. But by the time we shot them, I don't know, I kind of liked all of them, I kind of had a soft spot for every single little fake hitman. And I know Glenn did too, so I'm glad we did kind of moved them around a little bit.
Was it complicated to edit this film?
Yeah. Yes, more so than some films. I swear I could have a cut 10 days after wrapping sometimes. It's because, just shoot it in such a way, and it's kind of obvious of how it all comes together, and that's kind of the movie, But this one wasn't difficult. It was just very processed. Like I mentioned earlier, the screenings, having new ideas.
Oh, I see, yes, yeah.
Not wanting the audience to have questions. And, so it's like feeling the way through to get that experience to work. Yeah, I think I was more conscious of the audience here. So many movies I've done, you just maybe screen it for a few friends and go, okay, that's it. It's not changing it much. It's like, but this one I really wanted it to work. I really wanted it to work on its own terms, which aren't usually my. Again, I was on slightly different turf a little bit, I guess.
Does it make you want to do this
in
kind
these
of
genres.
thing again?
What's that?
Do you want to do this kind of thing again, or are you?
I don't know the story. I don't have anything like it in my immediate future. I don't think this was maybe I would, but yeah, it was fun.
The score is really fun as well, isn't it? Did that come late, or was that early?
It was a little later than I thought. Graham Reynolds is the composer I've worked with for another, same 20 years or so. At first, I thought it was going to be all score, just thinking of the genre, like, oh, no needle drops, no songs. But I the more I was in New Orleans and hanging out, I was like, oh, I really, the music here is so good. It's very evocative. Yeah. So I go back around and say, oh, no, we're going to need a bunch of needle drops. And the producer is like, what? We don't have a budget for that. So I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Can we take it out? So we were kind of scrambling on the music to the very end. But, yeah, it had to work, the score. But it's kind of funny at times, too, when he first when he goes back to her place for the first time, if you really that kind of jazzy, it felt like a softcore kind of movie. And I just thought that was funny. You know, it was like, oh yeah, that's what we were working on. Was kind of, there was a little tongue-in-cheek quality to it. But when it works, it works. I mean, I do want you on the edge of your seat there. You know, toward the end, it's like, oh, things are going bad really quickly if they don't get out of this.
So was it a lot of back and forth on this score to try and get those moments to work?
Yeah. But not, I mean, Graham's really, I have so much faith in him. He can kind of do anything. You just be as specific as possible. You know, it's like any collaboration, you know, just be as specific and, you know, you try things. And we got there fairly quickly on the score. It was playing around with some of the songs. But the music, you know, some movies, the music comes early at the script stage. You know, you got all the music. This one, I was feeling my way through it. You know, I didn't, like I said, it sort of changed and stuff, so.
And so with the production designer, who again you've worked with.
Yeah, another long-term, 20 years. My editor, we've hit 30 years, so that's a real long term. Yeah.
So you don't even have to talk to each other these days.
Yeah, that's a long. Yeah, at this point we sort of share the same post-production brain. It's really.
Do you sit there in the edit,
mighty
or
convenient.
Are you there every minute, or are you leaving her alone?
No, post-COVID, we did an entire movie during COVID. I had wrapped like 3 days before the lockdown, and we did an entire movie just remotely. You know, sharing a screen. The way you can write that way, you can now edit that way.
I know, it's amazing.
Especially with someone you know really well and communicate with, it gets pretty easy. You know, that shorthand is convenient. So yeah, we came into my editing room, regularly, but not as much as I would have in the early days. Every year I get a little farther away.
And you've shot some of your own stuff, haven't you, in the past?
Yeah.
Yeah. But not on this one.
No. I like.
No, the production designer wasn't building sets.
No, it was just taking sets. Bruce Curtis is amazing, and his whole department. It was a kind of a decoration, taking kind of abandoned locations and making them into like police stations, and you know, it's very creative. It looks normal. You don't give it any credit, but if you know where you're starting from, it's kind of a magic act. You know, it's amazing what can be accomplished. So,
what was
the goal is like, I'm afraid they don't get much credit because no one sees the before. They just see the after and go, oh yeah, it seems like a police station. Like, well, no, that's actually a crappy building we found. You know.
What was the biggest challenge in the whole film, actually? What was the biggest challenge about this one? Or the scene that was hardest?
Yeah. Almost every film has one cross to bear that makes it damn near impossible, isn't it? But this one, I don't think it was anything to do with actors. You know, it's the usual. It was just what I felt was not enough money and a tight schedule. That's always.
So you were just fighting time.
Yeah, and people say, "Oh, it looks like it was a lot of fun to shoot." I mean, it was, but it was also we're a little behind every day because we've had to condense our schedule, so you can't really enjoy it. You know, that's when I'm a little envious of people with much more leisurely schedules. They're like, "Oh, you can kind of fart around," and you know, we're like, "Oh, we got it. Okay, great, that was great. Okay, moving on, next shot." You know, so there's not a lot of time to.
And you had animals.
Yeah, we live animals
notoriously
around.
difficult.
Dogs.
The cat. Didn't the cat have a fracture or something? Something went wrong with the cat.
Twigs had a little, between being cast and being in the movie, he had a little leg accident, which is like, I go, oh, but then that kind of screws up the continuity a little bit because there's some time goes on. He still has that injured leg, so. I don't know. Hopefully no one notices details like that, but you're kind of like, I didn't want to fire the cat. I liked him too much. It would have hurt his feelings.
And you are quite unique in working with actors at such an early stage, like getting actors to co-write with you. That's like not a normal thing, is it?
Yeah. I mean, I told Glenn on this, you know, like, let's just start working on it. Like, I'm going to rewrite it with you anyway. Let's just start now, you know, as we started working on it. So, as director, you know, I kind of feel like I'm the, you know, tie goes to me. You know what I mean? People kind of defer to you. It's your story. Okay. So you're taking any good ideas and you're bouncing your ideas off someone, and someone's contributing as much as they can. But, you know,
So it's sort of myth that people are improvising on your film sets. They're improvising on set. They're not improvising on set.
Yeah, never on set.
Never. So that's all happened in the rehearsal process.
Yeah. And we don't even improvise in a way that I think some of my people do it very successfully. From what I understand, like Mike Lee, I love his process, but they actually are improvising. I think they're doing scenes and they're, writing down, working out. I never do like acting exercise improv. For me, it's rewriting. We just talk a lot and make each other laugh and think, but we're not like, maybe we read the script, but we never go too far off the script. We might do a little rewrite, then the next day come back and work again on that scene, but I never have ever remember just sitting there and letting the actors just go for minutes or something. That
doesn't happen.
That's never made sense to me as a writer or a storyteller.
Yeah.
I just don't think that, I mean, if you can pull that off, but I don't know if that's, I don't know. I think that gets in the way of storytelling. Or I don't know. I'm not trained at that. I just don't figure that would help me make my movie.
But what's mystifying to me is how you get these incredibly kind of naturalistic performances that are so sustained over long takes, like in the Before Midnight trilogy. You know, they're like, those takes are like 6 or 7 minutes.
Yeah, quite a few. In the last one, we did like a 14-minute. We did like a 14-minute. Yeah, with the kids asleep.
You did a 14-minute?
Yeah, it was 14-minute. You know, the digital age. We could.
Oh my gosh!
But that's so much rehearsal. You know, so much writing and rehearsal, and
What? But not on the day. Not rehearsal on the day.
No, in the months, leading
before.
up to it, perhaps.
So they know exactly the timing and of every line of dialogue,
every gesture.
Really,
it sounds crazy, but and I realized later that people think those are improvised. They almost don't give them credit as actors, but I think that's the hardest thing to do.
Really,
to be like real and compelling.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to be like some big dramatic or screaming or crying and a lot of improv leans toward that, like conflict. Oh, what'd you say? You know, it gets really conflicty really quick because it's kind of easy to bring a lot of oomph to it, but it's kind of hard to improvise just a real conversation. I wouldn't see how to do that.
Yeah.
And take it anywhere. You
know?
So
I
don't know. It's a writerly process, but I don't know. I want actors to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And I find that is just...
So you're creating I'm being told that we need to open it up to the audience.
Yeah.
But you're creating a very relaxed atmosphere.
Yeah, a comfortable atmosphere. I trained as an actor, never wanting to be an actor, but as a filmmaker, I know just enough about it to appreciate a good actor. And what made me better was prep and being thought through and just being comfortable, I guess.
Yeah.
Secure. You know, I think actors can sense it in a director if you're afraid of actors or if you. And I tell all my, young aspiring filmmakers, well, get an acting class. You know,
it's really useful, isn't it?
And it's really helped me as a writer too. Get up in front of a room of people and
it's
perform.
terrifying.
It's mortifying.
And also, you want a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
And you don't always get it. But
it's tough. So that's brave. So you appreciate the bravery of actors.
Yes, you do.
You know, so they can sense, you're like the coach with a superstar player. Like, I know just enough about the sport that I can appreciate how good you are.
Yeah.
And maybe help you if you're doing something mechanical a little wrong, but I don't pretend that I can do what you do.
Yeah.
I think they sense that.
Yeah.
They're like, you kind of appreciate, you're not afraid of me. You know, like if you go to pet a dog and you're actually afraid of it, it senses that and it bites you.
Actors are like dogs.
Actors are the same. It's like, hey. Like, what's wrong with you? But if you can, Well,
children also sense that,
exactly. They can read what you're really thinking. So I'm not comparing actors to animals.
No. We mustn't take that out of context.
In any way, believe me. But just a comfortable environment. And I have a sports background too.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of practice, and then the game is to relax and just play.
So that's being on set. It's
figure
like
out
being
what
in the game.
What the rules of the game are and how to play it.
Yeah, that's true.
You're prepared and you're relaxed, and then you can maybe do your best. So that's my little sports metaphor for
for the sporty people.
Anyway.
So any questions in the audience? Because we've got a few minutes for. Oh yeah, I think we're going to send some mics up. Everybody has to have a mic. Apparently, you can't just shout it because they're recording it.
Right.
Hi, thank you so much for the film.
Oh, thank you.
My question is about the framing, using existentialist philosophy to frame the film, Nietzsche and Freud and all that jazz. Yeah. I was wondering, where did that idea come from and how did that develop throughout the whole writing and pre-production process?
Well, that theme of, I would call it identity, that sort of developed in the genre. It's like, oh, well, if she, gets back in touch with them and they connect, then he's still Ron. I thought, oh, that's really fascinating. He's stuck in this other persona, becomes a portrait of identity, And that was there from the beginning. Here's this mild-mannered college instructor who's actually playing a cold killer. That's that's an identity crisis right there in a certain way. But to manifest that in his real life was fun. To see him trapped in a persona. She's got her own persona going. She's a lot of stuff's going on with her off screen. She's up to something. So the levels of deceit, the complexity of that, and that's just something, basic philosophical question, I guess. Who am I? Why am I? Can people change? Are we playing a role? I love that stuff.
It's fascinating.
And I'd say 20 years ago, I probably thought, oh, we were pretty fixed, as our personalities, ourselves. But just like him, and now I'm lecturing like Gary, but yeah, I had read, there had been a lot of research lately. Any professor can say that and then spout off about anything. But yeah, I had read studies and things like, oh, that's really fascinating. You really can maybe push your personality and dial up these other, you just got to work at it. It's like, I like that idea that you could consciously change, willfully be, I haven't been able to do that in my own life, but it was an interesting notion, that kind of, it floats around the movie because that's exactly what's happening in the movie. So it's kind of fun to have the conceit. Gary was a psychology teacher, and he was kind of a Jungian scholar, and I loved all that. But so it felt real to his character, and that is on point. Every lecture can kind of be, you can be kind of hitting home those themes pretty hard in a character-based way. You just happen to be supporting your own thesis as you go. Even toward the end, before they kill Jasper, he's talking about these kind of the death penalty. I'm anti-death penalty, but it's like, oh, that is interesting. I'd read that, like, oh, historical, like people did kind of whack people just for social coherence. It's like, well, I guess you got to do what you got to do sometimes. So, but anyway, I threw that out there just to sprinkle that in before Jasper suffers a death penalty that I don't know if he deserved. He's a bad guy, but anyway, did that answer your question? It was it's just fun to sprinkle that in there.
I loved the film as well. I thought tonally it was really, really great. I think you mentioned you didn't really have any specific influences, so this might be a really short answer, like no, but I wonder what influences there might be. I mean, for some reason I thought of Jonathan Demme's film Something Wild. It just had that.
I do like that film. I haven't seen it lately, but what I remember is it really shifts tonally. When Ray Liotta, when he shows up, it's kind of this light thing, and then it just goes dark, like boom. It's like there's a switch in it. Is that about halfway through, or when does it go darker? That seemed like a bold shift, but no, I do like that film. Yeah, the films that were on my mind, and again, it's not in any one film, but I'm mashing up from the 40s, Double Indemnity and The Lady Eve, or those two fun genres, but in the same film, I don't know. But, in a more modern sense, and it's still 40 years old, like Body Heat, Lawrence Kasdan, I think that, you can't do better than that,
There's another question here.
Yeah, I just want to say, this film actually reminded me of, you just mentioned Lawrence Kasdan, and his son, Jake Kasdan, did a film called Zero Effect with Bill Pullman, which kind of reminded me of that.
Okay.
Which is it's a cool comparison. I love that film.
Okay. Well, good. I should check that out.
Fair enough.
I'm sorry.
Is this the first, I just wanted to ask, is this the first time you've worked with like a streamer? Because I don't know if I think this has had like some limited theatrical release.
Yeah.
But was that a thing that you prefer, or is this a new experience for you, or whatever?
We did this super independent, and we premiered at the Venice Film Festival in the fall and showed at Venice, Toronto, London, New York, the fall festivals. And we were just sort of out there, who wants to distribute us, if anybody. And Netflix had the most passion. The studios weren't interested, and it's just, what can you do? You're sort of a free agent in the market. So Yeah, I was glad. I'm glad someone wanted us, you know. So, you know, that's, and it's in theaters, you know, for a while, which, you know, I've been doing this long enough. The indie window of your film showing in theaters has gotten, I've seen it get smaller and smaller. So a few weeks in theaters or whatever, that's sometimes all you get anyway, you know. So I'm not, I mean, this one I do think is a crowd-pleasing movie that could have, you know, that, but studios don't think so. Yeah. We all like to think so, but I mean, from their perspective, they would rather do a sequel to a sequel or a IP, you know, something that's just safe. You don't lose your job. You do lose your job when you step out creatively and do something that maybe doesn't work, or, you know. But this was a finished film. They could judge, but I don't know. I got my own attitude, but I'm happy where we are. And, you know, so Netflix picked this up, but they did my last film too. I did an animation, you know, one of my last films. It was called Apollo 10.5. And it was an animated film that they actually financed too, which I was grateful for.
Any more questions?
So
we can do one more. Okay. Well, thank you guys. And on that.
This podcast was recorded at a Directors UK member event. You can hear plenty more directors in conversation by subscribing on the usual streaming platforms. Follow us on social media and find out more about us at directors.uk.com.